When my sister Harper laughed at me in front of everyone, something inside me cracked. She called me the family's biggest mistake, and the room laughed with her. They stripped my name from the records, branded me a traitor, and left me standing alone under those fluorescent lights, humiliated and erased. My name is Mabel Hayes. And that night, I swore I'd never beg for their approval again. One day, I'd speak just 3 words, and every single one of them would finally listen. The mornings in Norfolk always smelled of salt and burnt engine oil. From behind the counter of Harbor Brew, I watched the old sailors gather at the same table, their hands mapped with tattoos and stories no one else remembered. Their laughter was rough, honest, nothing like the careful political voices I used to translate years ago. The cafe door chimed, and a gust of sea air slipped in. I wiped the counter again, though it was already spotless. Habit. Routine kept the noise away. Every time the espresso machine hissed, it reminded me of the sound a security door made when it locked behind you for the last time. Outside the shipyard, cranes moved slowly through the fog. Inside, I polished a chipped coffee cup until the crack along its rim caught the morning light. The hairline fracture ran across the porcelain like a thin scar, same place, same direction as the one on my wrist. I traced it with my thumb, remembering the sharp pain the moment glass met skin, and everything I'd built was gone. Then, from the small radio near the register, her voice filled the room. Harper. Calm, measured, confident. Announcing policy reforms and NATO transparency. Even through static, her tone carried the same quiet arrogance it always had. I froze mid-motion, rag in hand. My chest tightened. I turned the volume down, but not off, as if punishing myself to listen. On the little black and white screen above the counter, her face appeared, perfect hair, perfect smile, the embodiment of control. I could almost hear her telling me to keep my emotions off my face like she used to. I shut the radio off and let silence stretch thin. Somewhere in that silence, the doorbell chimed again. Old Mr. Jenkins, the mailman, shuffled in his navy cap crooked. He nodded politely and placed a large yellow envelope on the counter. The paper bore a faded NATO seal. My name typed neatly across it, no return address. My stomach tightened as I slid it open. Inside a small USB drive wrapped in tissue and a single handwritten note in French. Pour la vérité, dis-lui ces mots. For the truth, tell him these words. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. Major Louis Gravier, the man who once sat beside me, translating military briefings in Brussels. The man who died 2 years ago in what they called a car accident. For a long moment, I just stared at the message. The USB felt heavy between my fingers, metallic and cold, reflecting a distorted image of my own face. A woman erased from the world she once served. Someone dead had reached back from the grave to speak to me. And the words "tell him" could only mean one person, General Armitage. I let out a short, bitter laugh that tasted like old coffee and secrets. 3 years of silence. Maybe that was long enough. That night, the rain kept knocking against the window, patient and relentless, as if time itself was testing whether I could still wait. The lamp on my desk cast a dull circle of light across old papers and unopened letters. I slid the USB drive into my laptop. The screen blinked, asking for a password. I tried Gravier's birthday. Denied. Then Liberté. Denied again. I hesitated before typing Les Jardins, his favorite phrase from the old missions in Brussels. The screen flickered once and opened. A voice burst through the speakers, grainy and weak, barely rising above the static. Louis Gravier. His voice carried the sound of a dying engine in the background. Mabel, if you're hearing this, I'm already gone. You were never at fault. The report was altered, and the signature that ruined you belongs to Harper Hayes. For a moment, everything inside me stopped moving. I stared at the monitor, listening to the faint tremor in his breath. I kept the original files. There's a hard drive, Louis Dupré has it. If you want your name back, tell General Armitage 3 words in French. He'll understand. Then came silence, long and heavy. I sat frozen, staring at the rain sliding down the window. Harper. The sister who once told me that justice was naive, that in politics, truth had to bow to survival. She had stood behind glass while I was accused, saying nothing. I pressed my palm to the desk, trying to steady myself. Outside, the streetlights bled through the rain like melted gold. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried in years. I only felt something locked inside me begin to move again, the pulse I used to feel before a mission that moment, when fear gave way to clarity. At dawn, I found myself walking to Ethan Duran's office. He'd aged, but the steel in his eyes hadn't. I handed him the USB. He listened to every word of Graveyard's message without interruption, then leaned back and said, "It's not over. Harper's scheduled to appear with Armitage at the NATO conference next week." I frowned. She's still trusted barely. Armitage suspects a leak inside, but no proof. You showing up might remind him what he lost when they silenced you. He reached into a drawer and slid over a laminated pass. "A service badge. No one notices the servers. You'll have access to the room. The tray's handle has a built-in camera and mic. Record everything." I held the badge, my fingers trembling not from fear, but from the strange electric calm of old instincts returning. "Harper and Armitage will share the head table," Ethan added. "Your job isn't just to watch. He needs to hear you say those 3 words, and if I fail, then you lose your last chance to clear your name." I nodded. "Then I won't fail." 3 days later, I left Norfolk behind. The apartment smelled of sea air and cleaning polish when I locked the door. I placed my folded uniform, the one I once wore with pride, into a wooden box and slid it under the bed. The USB, the badge, and my father's photo were all I carried. On the bus to Washington, rain traced crooked lines across the windows. I replayed Gravier's voice again and again. "It wasn't you, Mabel. It was Harper." Each repetition burned the truth deeper, replacing grief with resolve. A memory cut through the hum of the road, the NATO hearing room, 2019. The white lights, the smell of paper and ink. Harper standing behind the one-way glass, watching me fall. I used to think her silence was pity. Now I knew it was calculation. When I arrived in D.C., the city felt colder, sharper. The hotel Ethan arranged was plain anonymous. In the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, older, yes, but harder to break. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan: "Harper will host the head table with Armitage." Dupre confirmed attendance. I unzipped the garment bag. Inside lay a crisp white shirt and a black apron, the uniform of the invisible. I ran my hand over the fabric, thinking how poetic it was that the world that erased me would now look straight through me again. I brewed a cup of coffee, watching the steam rise in slow spirals. 3 years ago, they destroyed my life over a mistranslated sentence. Tomorrow, I would translate something they couldn't twist justice itself. Just as I set the cup down, my phone buzzed once more. A new message, no name attached. "Pour la vérité. Don't fail this time." Signed only with a single letter, H. Harper's initial, or someone inside her circle. I didn't know which possibility was worse, but I knew one thing: the silence was over. The game had begun. The gala hall glittered under warm gold light flags of NATO, the United States, and France, hanging in perfect symmetry above polished brass and glass. I moved among officers and diplomats, invisible in my black and white uniform name tag reading M. Hall. The tray in my hands hid a camera. The earpiece in my hair carried Ethan's voice. Cameras live. Dupre just arrived. Harper's walking him to the head table. Armitage is with them. I turned toward the center. Harper moved through the room like a politician, walking down a red carpet, navy dress hair, pinned tight, confidence radiating off her like perfume. She didn't see me, or maybe she didn't want to. I poured wine for a table of junior officers, pretending not to notice the cluster of high ranks behind me. Armitage sat at the head posture, straight eyes sharp. The same man who once called me the sharpest mind I've seen. Hearing his voice again, the steady weight of command nearly undid me. Harper turned just as I set a glass down. Her gaze met mine, steady and cold, before she smiled. "Didn't expect to see you serving wine, dear. The military must miss your translations." A few guests laughed. I bowed slightly. "Always serving, ma'am." Then I walked away, heart hammering, but my face calm. Ethan murmured, "Stay focused. The pass is happening soon." Through the mirrored wall, I saw Louis Dupre take his seat beside Harper. A small velvet box appeared in his hand, then vanished into her jacket when she leaned closer. I shifted my angle, letting the hidden lens capture the moment. Ethan's breath hissed in my ear. She took the drive herself. That's not protocol. Armitage doesn't know. The orchestra eased into Clair de Lune. Harper's voice drifted through the hum of conversation, soft French deliberate. La mer est calme ce soir. The sea is calm tonight. A code phrase. Old, dangerous. My stomach clenched. She was doing it again. An hour later, applause filled the room as Harper disappeared down the restricted corridor. I followed at a distance. Through the mic feed, I caught her whisper, "The data will be moved tonight." Dupré replied, "And Armitage? He won't know until it's over." My knuckles whitened on the tray. "Ethan, we can't let it happen again. Copy," he said. "We stop it at the source, Harper." I exhaled slowly. The collision was no longer avoidable. The next night gleamed brighter, louder. The honor for Global Defense Dinner overflowed with champagne and camera flashes. I moved between tables, the practiced grace of someone no one ever noticed. Harper stood near the podium surrounded by French delegates. Her laugh carried easily over the noise. Then I heard it, 3 words that froze my breath. Les jardins sont sûrs. The gardens are secure. The same passphrase that destroyed me. Only Gravier Harper and I had known it. She was using my downfall as her access key. Dupré raised a glass toward Armitage. "To peace, monsieur," Ethan whispered through static. "That's the pass key. He's spiking the toast." Harper gave a small nod. Armitage lifted his glass. Around us, 1,000 conversations blurred into one steady hum of deceit. I stepped forward, voice steady calm. "Ne buvez pas, mon général." "Don't drink, sir." The room froze. Armitage's hand stopped midair. Recognition flickered. "Mabel Hayes," he whispered. Harper paled but forced a smile. "My sister loves dramatics." I pressed the small trigger on my wrist. The feed from the tray streamed live to the security screens. The image appeared behind them. Harper accepting the drive, whispering the code, sealing her guilt. Armitage lowered his glass. Shut the doors. Guards moved fast. Dupré was seized. Harper's phone confiscated. Technicians confirmed the drive held an exact copy of the 2019 leak, stamped with her digital signature. Armitage looked at me, his voice quiet but fierce. "You were right all along." Harper tried to speak. "You don't understand. I was ordered." "No order excuses betrayal," he said. I stood still, the weight of 3 years pressing and lifting at once. Harper sank into her chair, the mask cracking. No triumph, no revenge, only the truth finally translated correctly. The basement interrogation room was cold enough to taste the metal in the air. The only sounds were the hum of the vents and a pen clicking against the steel table. Harper sat across from me, arms crossed, face calm, but eyes tight. General Armitage placed the hard drive between us. "Mrs. Hayes, this contains the same data as the 2019 leak. Only one person had access to both you." Harper gave a short laugh. "I was overseeing security, not translation." I met her eyes. "You oversaw the cover-up, not the security." Ethan slid a printed email across the table. "Approve the modified French transcript. H. Hayes." One glance and I felt the old chill crawl up my spine. Harper had changed my phrase, "Les jardins sont sûrs," into "Les données sont sûres," turning it into a code that opened NATO's network. Armitage's voice cut through the silence. "The phrase that triggered the leak, your words, Harper." She stiffened. I followed the Undersecretary's orders. "He's been dead for 2 years," Armitage snapped. "You continued after his death." Her face went still. The lie collapsed. "When they accused me, you said nothing," I said quietly. "You wouldn't have survived," she whispered. "Someone had to take the fall. That someone was me." Ethan handed me a pen. Captain Hayes signed to confirm the chain of custody. My hand didn't shake. I signed. Armitage nodded. "For the record, you're reinstated." Harper's eyes widened disbelief, mixing with jealousy. I didn't look at her again. The room felt like a morgue, too white, too bright. Only Harper and I remained. Why Harper? Because silence protects power, power protects survival, and who protects truth? She smirked. "Truth doesn't feed families, Mabel." "No, but it lets you face them." Ethan entered, dropping a file. "Every transaction since 2020, your encryption key, 200,000 from Dupré through a NATO shell company." That was consulting. Harper snapped. Then why hide it? Ethan shot back. Armitage watched from behind the glass. I leaned forward. You could have told me. I would have protected you, like I protected you. Her voice trembled now. You've exposed people above me. They'll bury you. Maybe I said, but this time I'm already standing on the grave. The guards led her out. The steel door closed like a full stop on 3 years of silence. Armitage handed me a small envelope, my reinstated military ID. You earned it back, Captain. I looked at it, then set it down. No, sir. I just borrowed it long enough to finish what I started. I walked out into the dim hallway, carrying nothing but the quiet that finally felt like peace. By morning, the city roared with headlines. Pentagon cover-up exposed. Senior advisor under investigation. I watched from my NATO quarters. Harper's face glowing on-screen flawless makeup, perfect posture, and eyes that almost hid the tremor beneath. A crisis meeting followed. Armitage's voice cut through the noise. We'll go public. The press already knows, but this time it's told right. He looked at me. You'll stand beside me. It's your name we're clearing. I nodded. Not for redemption, just to end the silence. The international press conference mirrored the hearing from 3 years ago, but this time I stood at the front. Armitage announced Captain Mabel Hayes has been exonerated. The truth survived silence. I faced the microphones. I have no statement, only gratitude to those who believed the quietest voice in the room. Then Harper entered uninvited. Flashbulbs flared. You think you've won, she spat. I didn't win. The truth did, I replied. Her confidence cracked. Cameras clicked as she walked away. Armitage later confirmed she'd filed to cooperate her way of admitting guilt. When it ended, I stepped onto the balcony. Ethan asked softly, Feels good, no? I said, watching the city lights. Just right. I left D.C. at dawn fog, curling low over the highway, and drove back to Norfolk. The apartment greeted me in silence. Same walls, same smell of dust and coffee grounds. I set my bag down and turned on my father's old computer, the one he'd used for classified translations decades ago. Buried inside a hidden folder, I found a single document, Hayes Protocol TXT. The first line read, If they silence you, truth will find its own translator. I stared at the words for a long time. It felt like my father had written them for this very moment. He must have known his daughters would choose opposite paths, one chasing power, the other defending truth. A week later, Armitage called. Harper's cooperating, he said. She gave us 6 names tied to the cover-up. And her, I asked. Probation and permanent dismissal. It's the best she'll get. I said nothing. Part of me wanted to feel relieved, but the rest just felt heavy. Family broken or not, still lived under your skin. That evening, Ethan stopped by and placed an envelope on my table. Official reinstatement, he said. You're clean, Mabel. Officially and forever. I gave a quiet laugh. Clean, but never simple. Later, I walked down to the harbor. The sea was gray and still. Harper stood there in a long coat, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. They'll ruin me, she whispered. You did that yourself, I said. She looked at me, voice thin. Do you ever stop believing in truth? No. It's the only thing that kept me alive. She reached into her bag and handed me a small blue notebook. My notes from the meetings. Maybe they'll help you understand. Then she turned and walked away without a glance back. I opened it. Each page was written in French, detailing every NATO meeting she'd attended. The first page held only 3 words in blue ink I chose wrong. The notebook listed code names, officials, handlers, buried alliances. A quiet confession disguised as cooperation, a final act of redemption. I closed it and looked toward the horizon. For the first time, the wind off the bay didn't feel cold. It simply felt clean. 2 months later, a letter arrived from the Department of Defense. The envelope was thick, embossed with the NATO seal, the kind of paper that used to make my heart race. Inside it read, Captain Mabel Hayes is invited to rejoin the NATO Intelligence Advisory Board. I folded it neatly and set it aside. I knew I wouldn't go back. 3 years of exile had taught me something the system never could, that justice doesn't live in offices or medals. It lives in the quiet certainty of knowing you were right when no one listened. Instead, I opened a small classroom at the city library, teaching free French lessons to veterans. Men with silver hair and trembling hands traced letters on worn notebooks, pronouncing each word like it might bring them closer to the lives they once knew. One afternoon, a man raised his hand, smiling shyly. "Ma'am, what does ne buvez pas mean? We keep seeing it on the board." I smiled back, my voice soft but clear. "It means don't drink what poisons your conscience." The room went still. The fluorescent lights hummed. For a moment, every face around me seemed younger, lighter freed. Outside the window, the late sun stretched across the harbor, turning the water gold. I touched the faint scar on my wrist. It didn't ache anymore. In my bag rested two objects, the blue notebook Harper had given me, and the USB drive from Grevier. Between them lay everything that mattered, the real history of our family, written not by power, but by courage. I ran my fingers over the notebook's worn cover, hearing Gravier's voice again. "For the truth," he said, "say those words." I had said them, and because of that, I could finally keep silent for the rest of my life. Not out of fear, but peace. The kind of silence that doesn't hide the truth, but honors it.